My son brought a 45-year-old woman as his prom date. When she saw me, she said, "You have 5 minutes to tell him the truth, or I will." She stepped out of the car in a black dress and red lipstick, and I understood in a single breath that my entire life had just shifted under my feet without making a sound. I'd been standing on the porch with my phone camera up, the way mothers do. The way we stand there like we're documenting a moment we already know we'll need later, for reasons we can't name yet. The neighbor across the street was doing something with her mailbox. Kevin from down the block was idling at the curb. Everything was ordinary. I had been waiting for a shy girl in a pastel dress. Instead, Vanessa. She was 45 years old, and she knew exactly what she was doing when she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You have 5 minutes to tell him the truth, or I will." My finger was still on the camera button. I didn't lower the phone. I didn't move. I think, for a half second, I took the picture, because that's what my body was doing before my brain caught up and told it the world had changed. "Mom," Austin called from behind me, the screen door propped open with his shoulder. "This is my date." My smile didn't move. I had been a widow for 9 years, 11 months, and 3 weeks. I know that number because I've counted it. Widows do that. We count the days like we're owed them. Like someone will eventually hand us a receipt. I had also spent 9 years building a life that kept certain people out of it. Vanessa was at the top of that list. My husband, Marcus, died on a Tuesday in October from a brain aneurysm. No warning, no last words. He went to work, and by noon he was gone. And I was 32 years old, sitting in a hospital waiting room watching a doctor's mouth move without hearing anything he said. What followed was grief in all its ugly forms. The sleepless nights, the bills, the casseroles from neighbors, the endless parade of people saying he was such a good man in that specific tone that means they've run out of anything real to offer. And then there was the estate. Marcus's father had died 18 months before him, a coincidence so brutal it felt almost designed. The inheritance was modest by some standards: a house in Tulsa, a life insurance payout, a small portfolio of municipal bonds, and a 1968 Triumph Bonneville motorcycle that Marcus had been restoring in the garage for 3 years. There were also 2 half-siblings from his father's first marriage. One of them was Vanessa. She had grown up mostly apart from Marcus, different mothers, different cities, different lives, but she showed up at his father's funeral, and she showed up at the estate proceedings, and she sat across a conference table from me and my attorney with the particular energy of someone who has decided that grief is a currency she intends to spend. She called me a thief in front of everyone. She said I had manipulated Marcus into structuring his estate specifically to cut her out, that I had poisoned his relationship with his father, that the motorcycle alone should have gone to her because it had been promised to her verbally, and blood meant something, and I was not blood. The proceedings stretched across 4 months. 4 months of certified letters and discovery requests, and a deposition that lasted 7 hours, during which I was asked, repeatedly and in slightly different configurations, whether I had ever discouraged Marcus from maintaining a relationship with his half-siblings. I answered the same way every time because the answer was true. I hadn't discouraged anything. Marcus and Vanessa had been estranged before we met. I hadn't created that distance. I had inherited it. Her attorney was a man named Gregory Foss, who had graduated from a law school I had never heard of, and who used the phrase de facto disinheritance 11 times in 1 hour. I counted. He was the kind of attorney who confuses volume for substance, who speaks quickly and watches to see if you flinch. I had learned by then not to flinch. Grief will teach you that, if nothing else. My attorney was Sandra Klein Esquiner, 22 years in estate litigation, who sat through Gregory Foss's presentations with an expression I came to think of as professional patience. The particular stillness of someone who has heard this argument before, has defeated it before, and is simply waiting for the opportunity to do so again. She had handled the estate of a minor county official whose family had been so numerous and combative that a local news station had run a 3-part series. This was not that. She also told me at one point, quietly, over coffee in her conference room while we waited for Foss's team to produce some documents they had promised 3 weeks earlier. The only thing working against you is that you're sympathetic. Juries and mediators sometimes want to find a way to give something to the sympathetic underdog, even when the underdog doesn't have a case. She paused. But we're not in front of a jury. We're in front of an estate examiner who has been doing this for 31 years and who has approximately 0 patience for verbal promise claims without documentation. She was right. We won. The estate was settled in my favor. Marcus's documented wishes were clear. The will was solid, and the verbal motorcycle promise could not be substantiated. Vanessa left the conference table without shaking anyone's hand. She sent Austin a birthday card the following June. I took it from the mailbox before he got home from school. I told myself it was protection. He was 8 years old. He didn't need to know about a woman who had tried to take his future. He didn't need the complicated grief of a family fracture that had nothing to do with him. I took every card after that. I don't know exactly how many. More than a few. I told myself I'd tell him when he was older. I never did. The thing about a lie you maintain for 9 years is that it stops feeling like a lie. It becomes architecture. You move through it without thinking the way you move through rooms in a house you've lived in long enough. You don't see the walls anymore. You just exist inside them. Austin grew up knowing he had his father's eyes, his father's patience, and his father's father's ability to take any broken object and make it worse before making it better. He rebuilt 3 different computers from salvaged parts before he turned 15. He took the Triumph apart in his sophomore year and spent 8 months putting it back together, consulting YouTube tutorials and a dog-eared copy of a Triumph service manual I found at a garage sale and wrapped for Christmas. He was in the garage working on that motorcycle when he found the letters. I didn't know about the letters when he found them. He didn't tell me he'd found them. He simply, and I understand now how deliberate this was, kept working, kept talking to me at dinner, kept doing his homework and making his lunches and living inside our life while quietly, patiently, and with the kind of thoroughness that should have told me something. He built a parallel investigation. He told me later that it took him 3 days to decide what to do after he found them. He sat with the letters in his room, read each one twice, and then did what methodical people do when they have new information. He mapped what he already knew. He went back through the journal, which he had kept in his room since November, in a spot he was confident I'd never check, behind the false bottom of an old tackle box, and cross-referenced names. Vanessa. She appeared 17 times in 2 years of Marcus's journal, mostly with affection. Once with something that read like sadness. I should have tried harder. The estate made her into someone I don't recognize, but she was someone I loved once. I should have tried harder. Austin had read that entry 11 months before prom night. He had not forgotten it. He was in the garage working on that motorcycle when he found the letters. The letters were in the saddlebag compartment, a small leather pouch riveted to the left side of the frame, cracked at the seams from age and disuse. I had put them there myself, 3 months after Marcus died. There were 4 of them. Letters Marcus had written to Vanessa over the years, not because they had a close relationship, but because their father had, in his final year, started urging a reconciliation. Marcus was, by nature, someone who tried. He wrote long, careful letters about what he remembered from the few summers they'd spent at their father's house, about a specific memory of her jumping off a shed roof, about wanting her to know, whatever happened with the estate, that he considered her family. He never mailed them. I found them in his desk drawer after the funeral. I couldn't throw them out. I couldn't read them again. I put them inside the motorcycle because the motorcycle was the last thing Marcus had touched every day, and the letters were his last words to someone he'd never gotten to say them to, and that felt right in a way that grief logic sometimes does. I forgot eventually that they were there. Austin didn't forget anything. He messaged Vanessa in February through an old social media account she'd never deactivated, a Facebook profile from 2011 that still had her listed at her Tulsa address. It took him 3 days to find it. I know because he showed me the search history later, walking me through every step the way a person does when they want you to understand the scope of what they had to do to get to the truth. They had coffee 4 times. She drove up twice. He drove to Tulsa once over spring break, telling me he was staying with his friend Marcus. A coincidence of names I now find almost unbearable. The 4th meeting was at her mother's house in Tulsa, where she gave him a photograph. Marcus and Vanessa at their father's house the summer Marcus was 16 and she was 12. Marcus is laughing at something off camera. Vanessa is looking at him the way younger siblings look at older ones when they think no one is watching. On the back of the photograph, in Marcus's handwriting, Nessa Bird, age 12. She landed on her feet. Austin had been carrying that photograph in his jacket pocket for 3 weeks when prom night arrived. I had been standing on that porch for 6 minutes before the car pulled up. I was wearing a sweater because the April air still had some cold left in it, and I had taken 45 photographs of Austin before he even got off the front steps, in the way that mothers document things they sense are ending. Vanessa got out of the passenger side of a silver Toyota Camry, Kevin's car, I realized later. Kevin had been recruited, and walked up the front path in her black dress, and said what she said, and my smile didn't move. "Come inside," I said. "It's chilly," because the neighbors were watching, because that's what you do. The second the screen door clicked shut behind Austin, Vanessa stepped close to me in that particular way of someone who has rehearsed this and is not afraid. "5 minutes," she said again. "Or I tell him myself." I grabbed her elbow. I pulled her around the hedge into the side yard, out of the neighbor's sightline. "You need to leave," I said. "Right now. You are not invited here, and you are not welcome, and whatever you think you're doing." "He found me in February," she said. The yard tilted. I want to tell you I reacted with grace. I did not. My hand was still on her elbow, and I think I tightened my grip because she looked down at my hand with the patient stillness of someone who expected exactly this. "He messaged me through an old account. We've talked. He has questions you wouldn't answer. He never asked me—" "He did, actually." She wasn't raising her voice. That was somehow worse. "He asked you twice last year if Marcus had any family he was close to before the estate fight. You told him no. He asked you if the woman his father mentioned in his journal, the half-sister, had ever reached out. You told him she had years ago, but that she was unstable and there was no relationship there." I had said those words. Almost exactly those words. "He has the journal," she said. He's had it since November. Marcus kept a journal for the last 3 years of his life. I thought I knew where it was. I had not opened the box in the closet where I believed it was kept in 7 years. I know now that Austin found it when he was 14, read it quietly over the course of a school year, and replaced it exactly as he found it. He was 14. I think about that often. 14 years old, reading his father's handwriting by flashlight, learning things about the shape of his family that his mother had decided he didn't need to know. The corsage, I said. My voice came out strange. The whole prom date thing, the story, his idea. She almost smiled. He said if you saw my car pull up, you'd lock the door and call someone. He said if I came out looking like a date, you'd be too stunned to run. He needed you frozen on that porch long enough. My 17-year-old son had run an operation on me. The screen door opened. Austin came out holding a glass of water. For himself, I realized, though he held it like a prop, something to do with his hands. He looked at us standing in the side yard, and he didn't look surprised. He had been waiting for this exact moment since February. He walked over and handed me the water instead. He'd decided, somewhere in the planning, that I would need it more. We went inside, all 3 of us. We sat in the living room, Austin in the armchair that had been Marcus's, Vanessa on one end of the couch, me on the other end. It had the quality of a mediation. It had the quality of a thing that had been arranged. I looked at them both, my son in his rented tux, Marcus's half-sister in her black dress, and understood that this— I looked at them both, my son in his rented tux, Marcus's half-sister in her black dress, and understood that this specific arrangement had been planned in detail, where people would sit, what order things would be set in. Austin had probably thought about where Vanessa and I would be positioned, whether there would be a table between us, whether the room would feel safe enough for the conversation to actually happen. He had, I realized, been planning this the way you plan a difficult conversation with someone you love, carefully, precisely, with a specific outcome in mind that was not revenge but something closer to repair. He was 17. He had done this at 17. Austin reached into his jacket, the rented tux jacket, the prom jacket, the jacket he'd chosen for this night for reasons that had nothing to do with prom, and pulled out a folded envelope. It was worn soft at the creases in the way paper gets when someone has opened and closed it many times, gently, over months. He set it on the coffee table between us. I found them inside the motorcycle seat, he said. Letters Dad wrote and never mailed. There was a photo of her name on the back. That's how I knew you'd recognize her. I looked at Marcus's handwriting on the envelope. I had not seen his handwriting in years. I had not let myself see it, specifically, because there are certain things that grief teaches you to avoid, not because you're weak, but because you're human, and a person can only hold so much. I hid her letters, I said. Austin waited. Every birthday card she sent. I pulled them from the mailbox before you got home from school. Every year. He didn't look angry. I want to be precise about this, because I have thought about it every day since. He did not look angry. He looked tired. A very specific kind of tired that you see sometimes in people who have been carrying something heavy for a long time and have finally decided to set it down. I know, Mom. I'm sorry. He let me sit in that for a moment. He was good at that. The pause, the space, the particular patience that Marcus had too, that quality of knowing when to be still. Then, my actual date is Jamie. He's meeting me at the dance. Kevin's outside at 8:30. I heard the word, he. I nodded once because it was the only thing to do and because there was nothing to say to it except yes, of course, I know. The one who tried to fix your tie, I said. Yeah. Jamie had been at our house 6 times since September. He'd been at Christmas dinner. He'd spent 4 hours once in December trying to refold Austin's rented bow tie while they both laughed about something I hadn't quite caught from the kitchen. I had been watching it happen for months, and I had never said the thing a mother is supposed to say because I was afraid, not of it, but of the conversation, the exposure, the possibility that naming it would open other things I wasn't ready to discuss. Austin had decided, patiently, that this night would open all of it. We sat there, the 3 of us, and Austin talked. He talked about the journal, about the letters, about the search for Vanessa's Facebook, about the drive to Tulsa, about his grandmother's kitchen table and the photograph of Marcus laughing at something off camera. He talked the way people talk when they have rehearsed something many times and have finally reached the moment when it can be spoken aloud. Vanessa was quiet through most of it. She looked at the envelope on the coffee table with the expression of someone who has been waiting for something for a very long time. I told them about the conference table, about Gregory Foss and de facto disinheritance, about Sandra Klein's stillness and the contested motorcycle and the birthday cards I had pulled from the mailbox year after year, telling myself each time that I would explain it eventually, that I was protecting him, that grief makes people do things that look like decisions, but are really just fear. Vanessa listened. She didn't interrupt. She had, it turned out, been in therapy for 6 years, something I didn't know, and something that showed in the particular quality of her silence, the way she had clearly been trained to receive difficult things without defending against them immediately. At some point, I don't remember exactly when, she looked at me and said, "He called me Nessa Bird from when I was 4. I jumped off the shed roof with a bedsheet. He caught me, broke his wrist, then told our mother I fell from the apple tree so I wouldn't get in trouble." She stopped. She looked at Austin and then back at me. I miss my brother. I almost said something. I stopped myself because what I was about to say was me too, and I wasn't sure I had the right to say it in the same sentence as her, in that particular moment after everything. But I thought it. Me too. Kevin's headlights appeared at 8:30 exactly. I saw them sweep across the living room wall. Austin got up. He straightened his jacket, the rented one, The prom jacket. He picked up the corsage box from the coffee table, a white wrist corsage he'd told me was for his date, and slid it into his pocket for Jamie at the dance. He kissed my forehead. He did it without ceremony, the way he does most things, the way Marcus did things, as if affection is simply what you do, not something you have to announce. He walked out the door. Vanessa and I sat on the porch as the car pulled away. The neighborhood went quiet in that specific way it does after something significant, as though the air itself needs a moment. The sky was going purple at the edges, that particular dust color that in April somehow always looks like it's ending and beginning at the same time. She told me about Marcus's letters, that she had read each one 3 times, that the last one mentioned the Triumph, and how he was almost done with the right cylinder head. She told me about her daughter, who was 11, and who apparently had Marcus's ability to fix broken things. I told her about the journal in the closet, about the box I hadn't opened in 7 years. We were not friends. We were not yet anything with a name, but we were sitting in the same quiet, which felt, after 9 years, 11 months, and 3 weeks, like more than nothing. When it was fully dark, she stood up. "I should drive back," she said. I walked her to her car, not Kevin's, I realized. Vanessa had driven herself, a rental. She had come from further than I thought. "He's a good kid," she said. "He is," I said. She nodded once and got in the car, and I watched the headlights back out of the driveway. I stood on the porch alone for a while, then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The screen lit up in the dark, that particular cold blue of a message you didn't expect. I read it once and then I read it again, because the first time I thought I had misread it. "Don't trust her. I know what's really in that envelope. Call me before she sees it." I looked up. Vanessa's rental was gone. I looked back at the phone. Unknown number. No contact, no area code I recognized. Sent at 8:37 p.m., 7 minutes after Austin's car pulled away. 7 minutes after Vanessa would have been walking to her own car out of my sightline. My hands were very still. When you've spent 9 years being afraid, not dramatically, not loudly, but in the specific quiet way of a woman who has survived something large and then organized her life around preventing it from happening again, you learn to read stillness as a sign. Sometimes stillness means it's over. Sometimes it means you're standing at the start of something. I thought about the envelope, worn soft at the creases. Austin had read it 100 times, maybe more. I had looked at Marcus's handwriting on the outside and stopped there. I had not opened it. I had not opened it tonight. Vanessa had not opened it tonight. We had all, for different reasons, left it folded on the table between us. I turned and went back inside. The envelope was still on the coffee table. I sat down in front of it the way you sit down in front of something you have been avoiding for a long time. I turned it over in my hands. Marcus's handwriting on the front, just her first name, Vanessa. In the left-leaning cursive he always used, the same cursive in the journal that Austin had read by flashlight at 14, learning the shape of his father's interior life. I opened it. Inside, 4 letters as I had expected, but also something else. A smaller, sealed envelope I had never seen, tucked between the 2nd and 3rd letter, sealed with a strip of tape that had yellowed with age. On the front, in Marcus's handwriting, "For whoever needs it most when I'm gone." My hands were still. I called Vanessa at 9:14 p.m. She had just gotten on the highway. She pulled over in the breakdown lane, and I could hear the cars passing on her side as I told her what I had found. She was quiet for a long time. "He knew," she said finally. "He must have. He wrote it before he was sick." Before everything. Yes. The smaller envelope contained a handwritten letter, 5 pages front and back, dated 14 months before Marcus died. He had written it in the way people write letters they don't expect to mail. Honestly, at length, without the particular editing that comes from anticipating a reader. He wrote about the estate, about his concerns that his deteriorating relationship with his half-siblings would create legal chaos if anything happened to him. He wrote about Vanessa specifically, that whatever their disagreements, she was his father's daughter and his sister and deserved to know she had been thought of. And he wrote about Austin. He had known, somehow, or suspected, or hoped, or simply named out loud the thing that parents sometimes sense before anyone else does, that Austin would be someone who needed to understand his own history in order to build his own life. He wrote, "I want him to know where he came from. Not just me, all of it, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts." The unknown number texted again while I was still on the phone with Vanessa, and then a 3rd time, and then a name revealed itself, slowly, in pieces, across subsequent messages that I recognized. Gregory Foss, Vanessa's attorney from 9 years ago, the man who had sat across a conference table from Sandra Klein and used de facto disinheritance 11 times. He was still practicing. I looked him up the next morning, after I'd slept badly, and woken up with the specific alertness of someone whose brain has been running its own investigation while they slept. He had a website, the same law school, now listed under a section called About. A handful of client reviews that all said some version of aggressive advocate, in a tone that seemed designed to obscure how many of those cases had been won. He had apparently spent 9 years believing there was something in the estate he hadn't found. And somehow, through Kevin I suspected, or through some search for Vanessa that overlapped with Austin's, he had learned that tonight was the night the envelope was going to be opened. He wanted to be in front of it. He wanted whatever was in there before anyone else could act on it. The 5th text. There are assets mentioned in that letter that should have been contested. She knows this. She's been planning this night for longer than you think. I read the text aloud to Vanessa. She was quiet in that particular way of someone choosing their words. He's lying, she said. I know. He reached out to me last fall. He said he had new information about the estate that could reopen the case. I told him I wasn't interested. I had been through enough. Why didn't you? Because it wasn't about the estate. Her voice was precise, patient. It was never about the estate for me. You understand that now. I just wanted to know Marcus's son. There was a long pause. I know, I said again. He must have figured out that I was going to be here tonight. I don't know how. I thought about Kevin. Kevin, who had been recruited. Kevin, who idled at the curb. Kevin, who had driven Vanessa to prom, and then, I realized, thinking about the timeline, who had apparently told someone else what was happening tonight. Kevin was 17. He didn't know what Gregory Foss was, or what he wanted, or why the timing of Vanessa's reunion with me and Austin might be useful to someone who had spent 9 years believing there were assets left on the table. I took a screenshot of every text. I sent them to Sandra Klein that night, all of them, with a brief summary at 9:47 p.m. Sandra had, in 22 years of estate litigation, developed what I can only describe as an allergy to certain categories of attorney behavior, and Gregory Foss's name produced in her a very specific stillness that I recognized from the conference table 9 years ago. She called me back at 10:03 p.m. Forward everything to me, she said. Don't respond. Don't block the number. Let me see what he does next. What he did next, over the following 3 weeks, was considerable and ultimately very clarifying. 6 months have passed since prom night. Austin and Jamie are doing whatever it is they're doing, which Austin describes as not complicated in the tone that means he would prefer I not ask follow-up questions. Jamie's at the house most Sundays. He has fixed 3 things in our kitchen that I didn't know were broken. He brought a plant in October and put it on the windowsill over the sink without asking, which is either presumptuous or intimate depending on how you look at it, and I have decided to look at it as the latter. I have not asked Austin the big questions. I am waiting for him to offer them, the way I should have waited for him to offer things for years instead of deciding in advance what he needed to know and when. He brought a plant in October and put it on the windowsill over the sink without asking, which is either presumptuous or intimate depending on how you look at it, and I have decided to look at it as the latter. I have not asked Austin the big questions. I am waiting for him to offer them, the way I should have waited for him to offer things for years instead of deciding in advance what he needed to know and when. I am trying, imperfectly, to be a different kind of parent than the one who intercepted birthday cards. I don't know if I'm succeeding. I'm trying. Vanessa and I have had coffee twice. Once in person. She drove up in October, and we sat in the same kitchen where I had intercepted birthday cards for 9 years and talked for 3 hours, and neither of us cried, which felt significant. Once over the phone, late at night, the way you talk to someone who has become a specific category of person in your life. Not a friend yet, not family exactly, but something that doesn't have a clean name and doesn't need one. She told me her daughter Mia has been asking about the motorcycle. I told her to bring Mia in the spring. Gregory Foss was referred to the State Bar Association's disciplinary board in November on the basis of several communications that Sandra Klein described to me as aggressively inadvisable for a practicing attorney. The disciplinary process, Sandra explained, was not fast, but it was thorough. And Gregory Foss, it turned out, had done this before, had found edges of settled estates, had reached out to parties in emotionally charged moments looking for leverage, had made implicit promises about reopenable cases he had no standing to reopen. The bar was not surprised. The bar was not, it seemed, encountering a first offense. Let the process work, Sandra told me. I wrote it on a post-it and stuck it to the refrigerator, where it still is. The small envelope, the one that said, "For whoever needs it most," is framed now. Just the envelope, the outside of it. Marcus's handwriting on yellowed paper behind glass. It's in the hallway between the kitchen and the living room, which is a part of the house everyone passes through. Austin stopped in front of it once when he didn't know I was watching. He stood there for a long time. I didn't say anything. I just watched him stand there, looking at his father's handwriting, and thought about the 14-year-old who had read a journal by flashlight, and the 17-year-old who had run an operation on his mother to get her onto a porch long enough to meet the truth. I thought about Marcus, who had written letters he never sent, and hidden a small envelope between them like a message in a bottle, aimed at a future he wouldn't get to see. I thought about what it means to love someone so well that you plan for their life after you leave it. I am not there yet. I am not sure anyone gets all the way there, but I am trying. My phone lit up on the kitchen counter. A text from Austin. Don't forget Jamie is coming to Thanksgiving. He has strong opinions about stuffing. I almost smiled. Then I did.